Hi, how are you doing? We are on the second last part of this chapter, transportation. We are going to study transportation in human beings today and also transportation in plants. Before we start, let's discuss a few things. What is the normal range of hemoglobin content in human beings? Do you know? First of all, the amount of hemoglobin in whole blood is expressed in grams per deciliter. The normal hemoglobin level for males is 14 to 18 grams per deciliter, and that for females is 12 to 16 grams per deciliter. Now, if we ask, is hemoglobin level same for children and adults? Well, infants tend to have higher average hemoglobin levels than adults. Do you know why? Well, this is because they have higher oxygen levels in the womb and need more red blood cells to transport the oxygen. Have you ever measured your hemoglobin level? Let us know in the comment section below. We have seen in previous sections that blood transports food, oxygen, and waste materials in our bodies. In class 9, we learned about blood being a fluid connective tissue. Blood consists of a fluid medium called plasma in which the cells are suspended. Plasma transports food, carbon dioxide, and nitrogenous waste in dissolved form. Oxygen is carried by the red blood corpuscles. Many other substances like salts are also transported by the blood. Thus, we need a pumping organ to push blood around the body, a network of tubes to reach all the tissues, and a system in place to ensure that this network can be repaired if damaged. That pumping organ for us is our heart. The heart is a muscular organ which is as big as our fist. Because both oxygen and carbon dioxide have to be transported by the blood, the heart has different chambers to prevent the oxygen rich blood from mixing with the blood containing carbon dioxide. These are the various chambers of the heart. We have four chambers. The carbon dioxide rich blood has to reach the lungs for the carbon dioxide to be removed, and the oxygenated blood from the lungs has to be brought back to the heart. This oxygen rich blood is then pumped to the rest of the body. We can follow this process step by step. Oxygen rich blood from the lungs comes to the thin walled upper chamber of the heart on the left, which is the left atrium. The left atrium relaxes when it is collecting this blood. It then contracts while the next chamber, the left ventricle, relaxes so that the blood is transferred to it. When the muscular left ventricle contracts in its turn, the blood is pumped out to the body. Deoxygenated blood comes from the body to the upper chamber on the right atrium, as it relaxes. As the right atrium contracts, the corresponding lower chamber, the right ventricle, dilates. This transfers blood to the right ventricle, which in turn pumps it to the lungs for oxygenation. Oxygen enters the blood in the lungs. Since ventricles have to pump blood into various organs, they have thicker muscular walls than atria do. So you might want to note this. Ventricles have to pump blood into various organs, right? So they have thicker muscular walls than the atria do. Walls ensure that the blood does not flow backward when the atria or ventricles contract. This is the schematic representation of transport and exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide that we just discussed. Also, the separation of the right side and left side of the heart is useful to keep oxygenated and deoxygenated blood from mixing. Now, The part that creates barrier between the left and right sides of the heart. Do you know what is it called? Comment your answers below. Now, such separation allows a highly efficient supply of oxygen to the body. This is useful in animals that have high energy needs, such as birds and mammals, which constantly use energy to maintain their body temperature. In animals that do not use energy for this purpose, the body temperature depends on the temperature in the environment. Such animals, like amphibians or many reptiles, have three chambered hearts. As you saw, we have four chambered hearts. But amphibians and reptiles, they have three chambered hearts. Therefore, they tolerate some mixing of the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood streams. On the other hand, fish, they have only two chambers to their hearts, and the blood is pumped to the gills, is oxygenated there, and then it passes directly to the rest of the body. So, fish have two chambered hearts, the blood is pumped to the gills, it is oxygenated there, and passes directly to the rest of the body. Thus, blood goes only once through the heart in the fish during one cycle of passage through the body. On the other hand, it goes through the heart twice during each cycle in other vertebrates. Now, let me deviate from heart a bit to tell you about blood pressure, which is the force that blood exerts against the wall of a vessel. This pressure is much greater in arteries than in veins. Can you tell us why? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and we would come on this in a while. The pressure of blood inside the artery during ventricular systole, that is contraction, is called systolic pressure. And the pressure in artery during ventricular diastole or relaxation is called diastolic pressure. The normal systolic pressure is about 120 mm of Hg and diastolic pressure is about 80 mm of Hg. Blood pressure is measured with an instrument called sphygmomanometer. High blood pressure, also known as hypertension, is caused by the constriction of arterioles, which results in increased resistance to blood flow. It can lead to the rupture of an artery and also internal bleeding, so we have to be very careful. This is now the principle involved in measuring blood pressure. If you want, you can pause it and go through it. Now, coming back to the heart, let's talk about the tubes, the vessels of the blood. Arteries are the vessels which carry blood away from the heart to various organs of the body. Since the blood emerges from the heart under high pressure, the arteries have thick elastic walls. So now you know why they have thick elastic walls, because the blood emerges from the heart under high pressure. Veins collect the blood from different organs and bring it back to the heart. They do not need thick walls because the blood is no longer under pressure. Instead, they have valves. Why? Because the valves ensure that the blood flows only in one direction. On reaching an organ or tissue, the artery divides into smaller and smaller vessels. Why? Because it has to bring the blood in contact with all the individual cells. The smallest vessels have walls which are 1 cell thick and are called capillaries. Exchange of material between the blood and surrounding cells takes place across this thin wall. So, what do capillaries do? Capillaries then join together to form veins that convey the blood away from the organ or tissue. Now, if I ask you, what happens if this system of tubes develops a leak? Think about the situations when we are injured and we start bleeding. Naturally, The loss of blood from the system has to be minimized. In addition, leakage would lead to a loss of pressure which would reduce the efficiency of the pumping system. To avoid this, the blood has platelet cells. What do platelet cells do? They circulate around the body and plug these leaks by helping to clot the blood at these points of injury. So, how do they help? They plug the leaks by forming a clot, right? They clot the blood at these points of injury. Now, there is another type of fluid also involved in transportation. This is called lymph or tissue fluid. The pores present in the walls of capillaries, some amount of plasma, proteins, and blood cells escape into intercellular spaces in the tissues to form the tissue fluid or lymph. Now, this is similar to the plasma of blood, but it is colorless and contains less proteins. Now, lymph drains into lymphatic capillaries from the intercellular spaces, which join to form large lymph vessels that finally open into larger veins. Lymph carries digested and absorbed fat from the intestine and drains excess fluid from extracellular space back into the blood. So, what is its function? Lymph carries digested and absorbed fat from the intestine and it drains excess fluid from extracellular space back into the blood. So, this was transportation in human beings. Hope you liked it. In that case, consider giving us a thumbs up. Next, we would discuss transportation in plants. We have discussed earlier how plants take in simple compounds such as carbon dioxide and then it photosynthesizes energy stored in their chlorophyll containing organs, which is leaves. The other kinds of raw materials needed for building plant bodies will also have to be taken up separately. For plants, the soil is the nearest and richest source of raw materials like nitrogen, phosphorus, and other minerals. The absorption of these substances therefore occurs through the part in contact with the soil, which is roots. If the distances between soil contacting organs and chlorophyll containing organs are small, energy and raw materials can easily diffuse to all parts of the plant body, right? But if these distances become large because of changes in plant body design, diffusion processes will not be sufficient to provide raw materials in leaves and energy in roots. A proper system of transportation is therefore essential in such situations. Energy needs differ between different body designs. Plants do not move, and plant bodies have a large proportion of dead cells in many tissues. As a result, plants have low energy needs and can use relatively slow transport systems. So, why do they have low energy needs? Because neither do they move nor do they have they do have a large proportion of dead cells in many tissues. So they can do with low energy and relatively slow transport systems. The distances over which transport systems have to operate can be very large in plants, such as very tall trees. Transport systems will move energy stores from leaves and raw materials from roots, right? These two pathways are constructed as independently organized conducting tubes. One, the xylem. It moves water and minerals obtained from the soil. The other, phloem, transports products of photosynthesis from leaves where they are synthesized to other parts of the plant. We have studied the structure of these tissues in detail in class 9. Now let's first see transportation of water in plants. In xylem tissue, vessels and tracheids of the roots, stems, and leaves are interconnected and they form a continuous system of water conducting channels reaching all parts of the plant. At the roots, cells in contact with the soil actively take up ions. This creates a difference in the concentration of these ions between the root and the soil. Therefore, water moves into the root from the soil to eliminate this difference. This means there is a steady movement of water into root xylem, creating a column of water that is steadily pushed upwards. Right? So the water would push upwards. However, this pressure by itself is unlikely to be enough to move water over the heights that we commonly see in plants. Plants use another strategy to move water in the xylem upwards to the highest points of the plant body. In order to understand this, let's perform an activity. Let's take two small pots of approximately the same size and having the same amount of soil. Now, one should have a plant in it. Now, place a stick of the same height as the plant in the other pot. Now, cover the soil in both pots with a plastic sheet so that moisture cannot escape by evaporation. You need to cover both sets, one with the plant and the other with the stick, with plastic sheets and place in bright sunlight for half an hour. You would observe that water droplets are found on the plastic sheet having plant and no water droplets are there on the plastic sheet which covers the stick. Well, this is because plants liberate water molecules into the air through transpiration. Thus, we can conclude that plants liberate water molecules into the air through transpiration. Transpiration in plants creates a pressure or transpirational pull in in the roots, resulting in water and mineral absorption. Going back to our discussion on xylem and phloem now. Provided that the plant has an adequate supply of water, the water which is lost through the stomata is replaced by water from the xylem vessels in the leaf. In fact, evaporation of water molecules from the cells of a leaf creates a suction which pulls water from the xylem cells of roots. The loss of water in the form of vapor from the aerial parts of the plant is known as transpiration. Thus, transpiration helps in the absorption and upward movement of water and minerals dissolved in it from roots to the leaves. Also, it helps in the temperature regulation. The effect of root pressure in transport of water is more important at night. During the day, when the stomata are open, the transpiration pull becomes the major driving force in the movement of water in the xylem. So far, we have discussed the transport of water and minerals in plants. Now, let us consider how the products of metabolic processes, particularly photosynthesis, are moved from leaves, where they are formed, to other parts of the plant. This transport of soluble products of photosynthesis is called translocation. It occurs in the part of the vascular tissue known as phloem. Besides the product of photosynthesis, the phloem transports amino acids and other substances too. These substances are especially delivered to the storage organs of roots, fruits, seeds, and to growing organs. The translocation of food and other substances takes place in the sieve tubes with the help of adjacent companion cells, both in the upward and downward directions. Unlike transport in xylem, which can be largely explained by the simple physical forces, the translocation in phloem is achieved by utilizing energy. Materials like sucrose is transferred into the phloem tissue using energy from ATP. This increases the osmotic pressure of the tissue, causing water to move in it. This pressure moves the material in the phloem to tissues which have less pressure. This allows the phloem to move material according to the plant's needs. For example, in the spring, sugar stored in root or stem tissue would be transported to the buds which need energy to grow. Now, let's do a quick recap of transportation before we conclude this part of the chapter. What are the components of the transport system in human beings? Also, what are the functions of these components? As we studied, the components of the transport system in human beings are heart, blood, blood vessels, and lymphatic system. Let's see these one by one. Heart. As we know, two upper chambers, the left and right atria, and two inferior chambers, the left and right ventricles, make up the heart. The human heart's primary role is to circulate blood throughout the body. Oxygenated blood is pumped to the body by the left side of the heart. Deoxygenated blood is pumped to the lungs by the right side of the heart. Second is blood. Blood comprises blood plasma and formed elements. It transports oxygen, carbon dioxide, nutrients, hormones, waste, etc. Third is blood vessels, arteries. They carry oxygenated blood away from the heart to the capillaries. Capillaries facilitate the exchange of materials within the tissues, and veins returns deoxygenated blood from the capillaries to the heart. And lastly, we have lymphatic system. As we know, it is a network of tissues, vessels, and organs that move together to move lymph across the body, transporting lymphocytes. Lymph transfers materials from the blood to the body cells and vice versa. The lymphatic system's functions include defending the body against microorganisms that causes diseases, preserving body fluid balance, absorbing lipids from the digestive tract, and eliminating cellular waste. So these were the components of the transport system in human beings. Next question is, why is it necessary to separate oxygenated and deoxygenated blood in mammals and birds? Separation of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood allows a highly efficient supply of oxygen to the body. This is useful in animals that have high energy needs, like birds, mammals, which constantly use energy to maintain their body temperature. Next question is, what are the components of the transport system in highly organized plants? Like we discussed, there are two components, xylem and phloem. Next question is, how are water and minerals transported in plants? We just saw that, right? So it is xylem that helps in the transportation of water, minerals, and nutrients from the soil to all the parts of the plant. And the last question for the day is, how is food transported in plants? And we very well know that food is transported from the leaves to the rest of the plant by the phloem. With this, we are done with the transportation part of life processes. We would soon be coming up with the next part of the chapter, which is excretion. So stay tuned, subscribe to the channel if not done already, click on the bell icon for future updates, and hey, keep rocking. Lots of love and best wishes. Bye bye for now. While I sign off, you remember this: keep believing in yourself. Have a great day. Bye bye.